So what BCAS, what is it? How did it come about?
So BCAS stands for Black Community Ambassador Support Program. It is a program / space for Black helpers. How it came about was a group of Black folks from Columbus were brought together almost exactly 2 years ago now, March 2019. And we had a conversation about mental wellness and Black folks. And the conversation quickly narrowed down to mental wellness for Black helpers. We had a conversation specifically about Marshawn McCarroll and Amber Evans, both Black helpers here in Columbus, Ohio, who we lost to suicide within 3 years of each other. And that's been in the past, I think, 3 or 4 years. And we talked about the fact that for so many helpers, they're dealing with the weight of the world in a way that others are not. So we know that that life is heavy, that the world is heavy, right? We know that stigma is a thing as it relates to mental health and wellness for everyone. We know that Black folks have a whole nother layer of stigma. And then when you get to that Black helper, that person that folks are looking to for support, and that's a counselor, that's a faith leader, that's a teacher, a coach, those people are looked at as experts. They're looked at as the strong one, right? And they're in those roles because they care, and they care greatly. And so what happens is they're so committed to that work and to helping people that they most times put themselves on the back burner. And so you kind of get into this position where you're looked at a certain way and expected to have the answers. And so what we saw was that there was a gap in spaces and places for people like that to get support. And so we started to kind of just figure out what could we create that was culturally responsive, because that's another issue, is that as it relates to well-being and mental health, for Black folks, there's not a lot of places to go that are culturally responsive, that speak their language, that look like they look and talk like they talk. And so we spent all of 19 putting together this idea for this program. We got money the first of 2020 and started with getting a program coordinator brought on. And we hired her February 24th. Columbus shut down 2 weeks later. And it was like, oh, okay. So it was, I had a meeting, I was in a meeting with some other social workers. I'm a licensed clinician, and I looked around, and they weren't Black folks primarily, but they were really stressed. It was at the beginning of COVID, and I'm like, whoa, these are the folks who are gonna be helping the people, right? And then it hit me, well, we've gotta do something for Black helpers different than what we were gonna do, because obviously COVID shut us down. And so we launched a support group at the end of March, within 2 weeks of the shutdown. And we didn't have to do much in the way of marketing, and we had people there, right there at week 1. So it kind of went from there. We were meeting, and folks just had that general anxiety. We all remember early March and April when we found out about COVID, and then we found out that COVID was disproportionately affecting Black folks. So thankfully, we were already having conversations, already in the space, and so as that reality emerged, we were already kind of, connected and had this trust built with the folks who were coming. And so we just really have challenged them. The biggest challenge was take your helper hat off and be a receiver. Folks that give, quite frankly, struggle to receive. And so we continued that on. And of course, we all know George Floyd was murdered. And here in Columbus, we had the protests start at the end of May. And I got a call from one of our original group members to ask if we could do a group just for organizers. And so June 2nd, the Tuesday after the protest started, we launched a group just for organizers. And again, didn't have to work hard to find people to come and be loved on. But it was disheartening to hear. I remember one person describing themselves and their experience as a landmine of rage, never knowing when it was going to go off. One person saying, I can't stop being Black. People were just broken and heavy. And then we talked about being raised in a culture, Black culture, it's all about taking care of your family, taking care of each other. You put yourself on the back burner. So this concept of me challenging them to say, and what about you, was so hard for them to process. And so we just worked with them over the months, and then we started one for Black men. And so we've been doing town halls and support groups and whatnot for Black helpers, just to give them space to be receivers, but also learn how, because that was perhaps the greatest challenge for them, was learning how to be a receiver.
Perfect, because I think that sets the stage. We have a great panel today, so
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah, so just to kind of bring everyone into the fold, so what does this have to do with us? Because you all aren't, well, we have one official helper, but your primary roles aren't technically helpers in the form of social workers or counselors or whatnot. But the interesting parallel, and what stood out to me most as we processed through 2020 was A, that so many folks were hurting. B, that if they show up, we actually watched people's lives change. Like, I watched people feel better just for A, being in a space of people who look like them, and B, just being heard regularly. But that was sort of contrasted by the fact that, I mean, we should have, and mind you, we had people coming from literally all over the world. We had people from UK, Canada, and all over the US finding us, right? And now, mind you, we just got started, so it's not like our budget and our marketing strategies were like high tech, but people were finding us, which let me know people needed it, right? But what stood most out is just that there should be so many more people, right, that are coming every week. And so I really have just started this mission of what do we do to break the stigma? Because you can give folks a space to come and get well and be supported, but they gotta come, right? And so I started thinking about the parallel between my work in leading the Black Community Ambassador Support Program and my work as a blue chip and executive coach. Similar in the part about the stigma, right? So you get to a certain level of success, and A, you're supposed to always be looking out for your company, for your employees, for your families. And B, you're supposed to have it all together and have all the answers. You're the strong one. You know everything, right? And so part of the reason for selecting you all for the panel today is just to kind of highlight that parallel comes as you sit in the seat you're sitting in, but also to just facilitate an authentic conversation, because I think when it comes to wellness, and especially Black wellness, because isn't that what the movement is all about? Right? So we're saying we want equality, right? But what we're really saying is we want to be well like everyone else can be well, right? That's the bottom line. We want to do well and be well. And so while we need policy change and we need anti-racist behavior, we also need to learn how to be authentic with ourselves and with each other, because we got to have some wellness as part of all of this, or, you know, I don't think the movement is successful, right? So the idea was to display authenticity, to find folks who the community looks up to and respects, who would be honest and say, yeah, I'm the VP at Cardinal. Yes, I'm the executive director of City Year, the CEO, right? But I have my own struggles, right? So that's why we're here today, and I want to kick it off to you, J-Rev, to get us started.
The pressure.
Here we go. So, you know, when I think about stigma and this idea of being a helper or being a leader and always having to have the answer, in our conversation, you know, prior to coming today, one of the things that stood out for me with you, interestingly, is that not only are you a Black male leader in a big boy company, Cardinal Health, right? But you're also actually a helper, and that is that you're in ministry when you're not at Cardinal Health. So what are your thoughts? I kind of gave to you what I observed in 2020, but what has been your experience? What is your experience as both a helper in the ministry as well as a Black leader at Cardinal Health?
Yeah, so a lot of thoughts jump in my mind. One is you kept hitting on the point of training folks and showing folks, and a concept there of we're rewiring, right? And so the reason why we're in this room today is we have been wired all our lives to grind, to hustle, to figure it out. And so there's not a wiring to say, take a step back and take care of yourself. And it almost is, at certain points in your career, it feels like a weakness. Oh, wait a minute, I can't keep up. I can't keep up with the pace, because you're fighting and you're racing not just against yourself, but against your colleagues, and you're trying to represent for us all. So that's, I think, something that we're trying to rewire ourselves and say, hey, it's okay to take a step back and be vulnerable and say, I'm having a bad day, or I don't have all the answers. To get back to your principal question though of, so the duality of corporate and then non-corporate ministry, it's one thing is in both sections, it's being a beacon of hope. Because you know that, especially as you lead a team or you're a senior Black leader in a team, people are looking at you and they're picking their cues off of you, right? They're like, okay, Liz didn't smile today. Something's not going wrong. Are we all getting fired, or is the company going down? So I got to put my game face on every single day and find moments there's a masking that happens. And then, but here's where the ministry helps me is, I know that I have a balance of hope and peace and calm, and not getting too high in the highs, not getting too low in the lows. So I always try to center myself back to, okay, if everything else is bad going on around me, what's one thing I can get excited about? I still, my wife and kids are healthy. And that seems like a small thing, but that's so big when you see people losing their lives from COVID, or you see people losing their lives from issues with society. So even if it's those small things, and then it's, you start building that momentum, and then you can encourage some folks and, okay, I know you're going through, but this is how I get through it, and this is what helps me. And, I don't walk in the cardinal preaching. That's not what they pay me to do. But you can still, interweave in messages of hope and peace just by being you. So,
but what about, okay, so you're the leader and you're the minister, right? But I mean, how do you handle the moments, because you have them, right, where maybe you have some self-doubt, or you're not really sure, or you feel like giving up, or do you have them? Is it a thing?
It for sure is a thing. When I was younger, I'm not incredibly old, but when I was younger, I felt like I had to be a robot. So let me always show up this way. But I'll pick on ministry for a second. We can all turn on YouTube or turn on the television and get this big, grand, hopeful message of someone that's telling us all the wonderful things. But the things that impact us are the people that talk about the trials that they've went through in the lowest moments. And so what I try to do is share with people my failures. Share with them the moments where I was flat on my face and didn't know if I was going to get through tomorrow, where I went through a divorce at a critical point in my life and trying to figure out, okay, what's tomorrow represent? So I go through that, and it can shake me, or it can help me, it can make me. So let's share those. And hey, if I've gone through that, and the minister or the leader at work or whatever, hey, if he can go through that and he can turn it around or come through it, then my problem isn't the only one. Because sometimes, and I'm gonna shut up, sometimes we get to a point where when we're in our struggle, there's an isolation moment where I'm the only one that's going through this. Like, Tasha can't understand this because this is me. But then when I realize that I'm not a unicorn, that there's actually 100 people.
Wait a minute, I'm a unicorn. I just want to put it out there. I'm a unicorn.
There's 100 people that have gone through this, then that's a help group in and of itself. And that's an encourage me for letting me know that, okay, I can figure this out. This isn't what I'm going through has been conquered before. I'm done.
So tell me like 2 or 3 symptoms, because you're telling me you went through, but can you tell me like 2 or 3 symptoms or actual feelings that you had in one of those dark moments?
Low self-confidence, doubt, anger, worry. Does that help? You want me to go deeper? Or?
The reason why I ask is because this is again why we're having the conversation is because either we don't talk about this stuff, or when we do, we give the high-level explanation of it rather than the actual description of you sitting, snot, you know, you can't breathe, you're hyperventilating, like actual symptoms. And so because we don't speak specifically about that detail, right? When other folks experience, they do think it's just them, because even if they heard a great story or overcoming, they didn't hear about the crux of what that looked like. So I think it's important that we specifically say, and what happened was I couldn't eat. I barely ate and lost 20 pounds, or I ate everything and I gained 50 pounds, or I literally slept only 1 hour a night, right? So Jonathan, what about you? Any experiences or thoughts on sitting in those shoes?
Yeah, maybe I'll start. I'll say begin with the end and where you left off. Saying, you know, some of the symptoms are things that are like, you know, I ask myself, I'm like, am I the only one? Mm-hmm. Is this normal? Like, does everybody do this, or is it just me? Like, like a minor one would be, you know, because you're at home with kids all day now, and it's like, you know, kid gets a math problem wrong or something, and it's like this extreme outburst, and it's just like, wait, am I reacting to him? Is it really that big of a deal if he got 8 out of 10 as opposed to 9 out of 10? And so is there something deeper? Or the one I talked with my wife about, because, you know, we sleep in the same bed, so is the, I woke up again, right? It's like, why were you on your phone? And I'm like, I don't know. But yeah, I woke up at 2 a.m, couldn't go back to sleep, don't know why. Randomly, and it's just, so it leads to the, yes, you know, you do coffee and other things, but it's like, when you sat back and look at it, there are those weeks where I'm like, you know, I could look and see all the other things that happened along with it, but, you know, in the middle of the moment, it's like, wait, did I realize I only slept like 3 hours a night each day this week? And is that a symptom of something that's just, I think we can all relate to the fact that everybody's stressed right now. But we may not all be willing to admit that, you know, say that I am really stressed, right? And, you know, we know it's okay, and we can say it's okay that, like, oh, everybody's going through this, but at the same time, it's like, is it? You question, you know, the confidence, am I the only one? Is there something wrong with me? Because, everybody else sleeps through the night, right? You know, they stop emailing at a certain time, and then they start emailing again, so everybody must have slept that 8-9 hours, right? So I'm the oddball, right? So what's wrong with me, right?
I think the combination of just the general stigma that comes with this type of conversation, as well as, again, if you're a leader and you're Black, right? You got to keep it together. Tasha, I know you have some thoughts you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about where that discretion and that isolation comes from. I mean, I grew up in a house where, you know, what goes on in my house stays in my house, right? So you weren't taught at an early age to seek help. You know, you watched, you know, grandma and aunties and everybody, your mom, you know, just make it happen without help. We weren't taught, you know, how to get help. And then you get into the workplace and you're even more fearful in the workplace, particularly if you're the only one or one of few. You've ascended, you don't want to seem like you can't handle it. The way that we are treated when you do have an issue at home is almost like it's now you know, could impact the rest of your career because you might need to step away and handle, you know, business or take care of, you know, yourself. I just came back from a 10-week sabbatical. And I recognize how privileged I am to be able to do it. You know, Jonathan, you talked about, you know, the pandemic, everyone's struggling, but I was struggling before the pandemic, right? Like I came into 2020, like, what am I doing? You know, like just, you know, the higher you get, the more there's demands on your time, on your dime, you know, on your knowledge. You start to feel like, particularly in the nonprofit space, you know, there's not a lot of, people of color leading nonprofits. So you start to represent the sector when they want a Black voice or a young Black voice. But I tell you, my organization, we work with younger folks, and young folks will keep you honest, right? They will keep you all the way honest. And so, you know, they'll ask me, you know, or say, you know, Ms. Tasha, I want to be like you. And I'm like, what's me? right? Like, let's be real honest. What do you think you know about me? Let me tell you what I sacrifice and what I give up. And I learned to do that because I watched the people I looked up to, who some are retired or moved on. They shielded what the struggle really was. And so then you got in that role like, wait a minute, didn't nobody tell me I was gonna have to be writing $10,000 checks to every nonprofit I wants me on their board, the demands on your time, the sacrifices from your family, with your kids, your husband, and that is that expectation, and you're trying to live up to it, and you are dying. You're exhausted. And self-care, as Jay was talking, I thought about the Audre Lorde quote about, self-care is not an indulgence. It's
Right.
it's necessary. It's an act of political warfare. But when you're a person of color, we think, a spa day is self-care. We don't think that we need to step away, right? That we need to, come home for a year. Some of us, we're carrying the financial burdens for our families, our extended families sometimes. So there's a lot of weight on our shoulder and responsibility. So the idea of taking a gap year as an adult doesn't even come to mind.
What's that?
Right. My AmeriCorps members is taking that gap year. But, we don't think about the opportunity of being able to step away. We think we're gonna go to the beach for a week or two and we've done good. And then you go back
And then you was working while you was at the beach.
Yeah, and you want to call, you gotta get on the board meeting, you gotta do this. And everyone else though, can go on big game fishing trips and walk the El Camino for a month at a time, and somehow we think that we're excluded from that ability to take, that time. And I said, to hell with this. This was to protect me, right? I was exhausted. What we witnessed and experienced, our lived experience, we were carrying everyone's water. When you're the leader, you're expected to help everyone process, right? I have younger folks in their 20s just coming in, young professionals. None of us really have experienced anything like this, but they're looking to you to help them process, and you haven't processed. It was a lot to carry, and I was really struggling, throughout the pandemic, and I had to push pause. And I was very candid with the team about what I was experiencing and why I needed to step away. And what the response I got back from them, it let me know that we were on the right path. They were like, thank you for modeling what it looks like to be a leader, to have struggles, to be comfortable talking about mental health. And that I knew I was on the right path. It wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy, but I stepped away.
You said I was struggling before COVID. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, burnout.
However far you're willing to go.
Yeah, it's burnout. It's a real medical diagnosis. It is. It's. We try to vacation it away, happy hour it away, spa day, it away. And I was burned out. And then frankly, the burnout led to depression and anxiety. And when they say that big D word, you're like, but wait a minute, my life is good. I don't have anything to be sad about. Depression is more than just being sad. You don't even know that you're working so hard. You don't even recognize that you're not quite yourself. You grinding. I mean, you're getting all the accolades and the awards. And it's like, there's no way, but you're not, you're just not yourself. Like you're too tired to even know what your self is. Right. And so, when that word came up, that it was like, situational depression, I started doing a little bit of research. Some people call it SAD, during the weather. We live in Ohio, it's not a lot of sun, it's gray, but it can extend longer than just the winter months. And, I said, well, I've been going to a therapist, since I was, in 2012, some years ago. And when I first started going, I used to try to justify it and say, I just feel like a rich white woman, with my Starbucks and on the black couch. But we started really chipping away at some things. You realize you haven't healed from some of those childhood traumas, relationships, the water you carry at work when you're maybe in a white dominated organization or patriarchal organization. And, you don't realize the things that you keep bottled up inside, and you didn't even know it was a thing. You didn't even know it was chipping away at who you are, and all of that just compounded. So I was exhausted. I was exhausted, and people think some of us make success look easy. It's not. Shoot, it's easier to fail. I mean, you know what I mean? It's easier just to be, to mess it up every day. It is hard to keep this up because you're only as good as your last thing, as your last fill in the blank, right? Your last award, your last accolade, your last acquisition, whatever. And you're always trying to replicate that. It's like a drug. Success becomes, you know, a drug, and people around you want, you know, everybody don't want to help you build the success, but they want to align with this success, right? And so now you're getting called to be on this panel and to do this, and can you, you know, be a part of this? We want you a part of this organization. And being a person of color, you feel that you owe that maybe to the community. You giving back and lifting up, but you're losing every time you answer that. It's like a death by a million cuts, and that's what it felt like.
How did you know? You said burnout, you hit a wall. How did you know?
I wasn't interested in the things that filled me up anymore. You know what I mean? I really love the work that I do. I love our kids we work with, you know, Columbus City Schools. I'm a graduate of Columbus City Schools. It wasn't enough to wake me up anymore. You know, and everything was irritating me, you know, the smallest little thing. And I just wasn't finding the joy that I used to. It was like I was just surviving. You know, you get up every day. It's kind of like where we are now. You know, it's like, what day is it? Blur's day. I mean, it's just like, get up, everything looks the same day, you know. And that's what it was. And that's not who I am. I started becoming more of I'm an extrovert, you know, but I started becoming more of an introvert, but in a way that I didn't like, right? It was like I was starting to isolate from the things that, you know, I really needed in my life to keep me going. It was no longer interesting to me.
Thank you for sharing that. Lanice, would you like to share maybe any struggles you've had and or the challenge with maybe even knowing that that's a struggle, but you're at the office, and where do you go? Who do you talk to?
You know, I can relate to everything Tasha just said. I mean, you know, so I just feel like we're building upon each other. I walked into 2020 broken and not knowing that I was broken, right? And so I have you know, you always find a girlfriend at work, that truth keeper that's gonna tell you what's real. And I called her and was like, I need you to come to the conference room. And she was like, showed up at the conference room, and we in there praying and crying and, you know, all this stuff. And she said, I've never seen you like this. She's like, we went through some stuff, but I've never seen you like this. So, so I had a therapist, right? So I had my little therapist, and I just happened to have an appointment that day. And I said, I don't want her to see me like this. And I got in my car and started to drive home, and then I turned around and was like, nope, go. You got the appointment, she's gonna charge you a fee, so you might as well sit up on the couch anyway, because if you don't show up, they charge you anyway. Right. So I walked through her door and she said, you're going out on FMLA.
Which I can say as a therapist, if we've gone that far, then that means it's going down.
It's real.
Yeah, she said, you're going out on FMLA. Then I got mad. Because I'm like, what? Like, I got it together. Like, you know what I'm saying? I put my mask on.
I'm gonna be back.
Right, you know, and so she was like, no, for real. You're going out on FMLA, send me the forms. And so I felt guilty not going to work. I felt guilty that I had to call and tell them that I could not come in, that I was not coming in, right? And so I sat down and I was like, okay, well, it's a couple days off. It took me 2.5 weeks to figure out that I really did need it. Like 2.5 weeks to figure out, because I started thinking to myself, like, why are you here? How did you get here? And I'm like, you've been putting Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid, and now you just jumped in the ocean. And this was before COVID hit. This is before COVID hit. This is the beginning. So I end up off of work for 3 months, almost 4 months, because by the time I realized I needed help, it was time to go back to work. And then she was like, you're not ready yet. And I'm like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are these people gonna do? And literally she said, you're not ready yet. So I stayed off. And then it was time for me to go back to work. My extension had ended. Time for me to go back to work. And then I got anxiety.
About going back?
About going back to work. And she was like, nope, you're not ready. And so then I started thinking the next 30 days of that extension, I was like, well, you know what? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do for a living? Because I'm gonna walk in there and they're gonna be like, you can't I'm sorry, you can pack up your desk, take them little couple pictures you got. Like, I just knew that it was the end of my career because I'm like, who's going to follow me now? Who's going to listen to what I have to say? Who am I going to be able to lead? Because they're going to know, because I felt like it was a ticker tape across my forehead, like broken. You know, so you walk through the door like, do you know she her therapist? You know, I just felt like everything was just on my forehead. And so, and then I had to go back to work, and the stay-at-home order was issued. I was supposed to start work on Wednesday, and I'm like, hey, I saw the stay-at-home order. Does that mean I work from home? They're like, yeah. And so it was good for me because I actually was crying when I was supposed to be. I would cut off my camera, be on conference call, and I'd be crying. Because I was so stressed. And then we started talking about, then George Floyd happened. You know, and we started talking about all this stuff, and then I'm breaking down in meetings, you know, and I'm like, this trauma is real. I mean, I literally, and I was so embarrassed, but I got good feedback and support from my team, but I couldn't cut the camera off fast enough. And they caught me crying. And I just started crying.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, okay, so everything we just talked about really wasn't specifically necessarily related to being Black or being a Black woman or being a Black man or being a Black leader or being a Black minister. But clearly everybody here is Black, and we know there's some extra levels and layers to that. I know for you, you shared when George Floyd was murdered and everybody showed up that you had a broken moment. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was the next day after George Floyd, and we have, you know, 62 young folks between the age of 18 and 25, you know, like I said, young professionals, but the staff is typically older. And, you know, as the leader, we want to hear from you. You know, what are you thinking? I don't know. What are you thinking? You know, and I kept trying to, all night, I kept wrestling with what to say and how to say it. And I just, you know, I heard the Spirit just say, this isn't, you don't know. You know, this is a lived experience for you. I'm also a mom of a 13-year-old and a college age, you know, 20-year-old. I'm trying to help them process. I got my 13-year-old telling me he's scared to go outside in our neighborhood, you know, as a result of this. And I'm expected to show up with some eloquence the next day about how we're going to get through this, and you know, America's great, and let's be idealistic. And you know, I'm about to put on Public Enemy at this point. You know, that's how I was feeling. I was angry, I was hurt, I was broken, I was all those things at once. And so I sought help. I asked a good friend, Dr. Mark Lomax.
My guy.
He's a good friend. I called, I said, brother, I need you. I said, I need you to do this for me today, because I can't. And I told my team why. I was very transparent. And that is something that I have grown in this year, is just that authenticity and being willing to show up in my vulnerable state. And I was raw. I was just raw with emotion. And again, at that respect level, it's like the more you do it, it becomes natural. I used to cringe at the word when someone says, I just love how candid you are. And candid to me, you say that to a Black woman, it's like, oh, I'm rough around the edges. I just, say whatever's on my mind. But what I realize is that it's missing in leadership today. It really is. And so when people see it, when they can spot it, they do. And so I showed up as raw and as authentic as I could. And I said, I can't do this today, y'all. I'm hurting. I'm scared. And, Dr. Mark Lomax, in the way that he could, walked us through. And it wasn't eloquent, it was raw. Talked about the history of what we were experiencing, why we were experiencing this, and how we're just expected to sing some hymn and move on. And this was not that moment. And that's what I was feeling. I was expected to speak eloquently, to sing a hymn, and let's just get back to work as if this didn't happen. And unfortunately, this summer, that was not what was going to happen. And I started passing that, so that was that asking for help. But I also started, holding some of my white colleagues accountable. Why are you always looking to the Black people to lead these conversations. This is where you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. None of us are going to get it right. We're all unlearning some of the history and some of the behaviors we've been taught. We've all, have had experience with racist ideals, even being a Black person. So I don't have the right words to get us through this right now. Let's all be authentic and vulnerable right now. You're going to stumble and you're going to make a mistake, and we're going to hold each other up. But I just could not. I was still the leader, but I was very vulnerable. I was a different leader in that time. And I realized from the comments that I got, the private emails about just thank you for allowing, seeing me cry. I'm not a crier, but seeing me cry, people was like, they just let it go. And we needed it. We needed that cry together.
It's interesting you bring up even asking the white colleagues to be vulnerable because, when I think about the fact that you all are even here, and thank you for being willing to do this, because I'm very aware that as much as I've attempted to create safety for you, clearly this is not a private conversation. And what I know is, whether we consciously realize it or not, all of us right now are making split-second decisions about what we're going to share and not share, right? Partly because of our roles, partly because of where we work, maybe because you're a man, maybe because you're a woman. There's all kind of reasons why, right? But it's like we're always on stage, and we don't have the privilege, really, to miss a step. It could cost us our job. It could cost us our lives. I think about Tiger Woods, and clearly none of us are on Tiger's level, but that whole idea that you got in a car accident and everybody is in your whole business and need to know whether or not what was in the blood, where was you coming from, did you speak? And so I look at even that as an example of how this is what we live in every day without being top level celebrities, right? It's this, be thoughtful. And then you're balancing between, okay, now we got a movement so we can get a little bit more, but maybe not, because we've worked hard to get at the table. We know what the table is, right? And while we want to advocate for more and for equality, we also know how delicate the table is, right? So, Jonathan, any thoughts on sort of that balance? And meanwhile, it's not like Black folks are a monolith, right? We don't all agree on what equality looks like. We don't all agree on whether or not protesting is what's up. We don't all agree on anything because we're all individuals. So that's all a lot. What are your thoughts on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, I can tie together kind of both ends because it was interesting for me as a Black leader. I guess what our staff even knew, right? What the world knew, just kind of all these different perspectives. And I'm kind of I remember in the moment last summer, I'm kind of I feel like people have no idea. People literally have no idea. And what I mean by that is during unrest and protests and everything last summer, I very vividly remember getting a text message from a client at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning while I'm trying to, relax, right? Because I think it was a weekend away, and I was trying to relax, and it was you get that text message, and it's there's nothing good, and it was, I don't even think, as you said, we're making split-second decisions. I can't even share much about it, right? Other than to just say, there was, I'll say, action that directly affected what we do. What I do as an architect in the aftermath. And I'm I'm not even allowed to talk about it. Here I got this text message, I need to do something, I don't even know what to do. And then following that was reaction from our staff saying that we came into work on Monday and everybody pretended like everything was okay.
Yeah.
And the Black staff saying you acting like everything's all good, and you acting like this, and it's why aren't you doing something, why aren't you saying something? And it's do y'all even know what is the weight of what we're carrying? And if anybody could put dots together and figure out what was going on, it's this is a big deal. And it came to a moment, I remember, because it was, you said it was a Friday after. We had that weekend, it just came to a head where it's just I just got to tell everybody how I feel. Like, they need to know, and you said it wasn't articulate, it wasn't, but it was just like, it was full of emotion and anger and tears, and it was the conclusion of like, well, look, y'all, and it, because I remember that Friday was our all-staff town hall, and I'm like, and it's Breonna Taylor's birthday. And I'm just like, and I don't know, y'all, like, look, like, I can't be everything to everyone, and it's like the inability to even, for the sake of our staff, right, to say that I can't be like all black, you know, run my fist in the street, right, because it was like that would do more damage to y'all than it is like, it's even still like kind of a, I don't know what to do about that. Like, I'm still processing that. Like, I'm still like, I don't know.
It reminds me of something you said, and it just really stuck with me when we spoke a couple weeks ago, and you said something about it's like, who am I, and the difference between who I am, who white folks want me to be, who black folks want me to be, and it's like this dichotomy, this two lives, right, or more, right? And again, heaven forbid that your thoughts and beliefs don't align with the overarching general agreement about what black folks are doing or thinking as a black person, then whoa. So now we got the challenge with how you maneuver white folks, and you got the challenge with whether or not you're aligned with what the general overall black community is saying and doing. What's your experience, Jay, in that regard that you can share? Because again, I'm honoring that there's a lot we can't say here, but I think just in talking about the fact that we can't say everything speaks volumes to this whole conversation.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. One is, I think back to after Breonna Taylor is killed, I think it's late August, September, some time frame of when the cops, where the charges came down, or lack thereof. So I have a town hall that next day. And just to give you a little bit feeling of my team, I've got a couple hundred folks in Little Rock, predominantly black population. I've got a couple hundred folks in Louisville, Kentucky, predominantly white population. So now I'm on live, and I've got to thread the needle and not polarize one or the other. And so it was like praying all night, like, what do I say? How do I say it? Let me figure out. And even as the words are coming out, you're trying to make sure, let me not offend anyone on this call, but let me still be authentic. Because I have a population who's looking at me saying, please keep it real for us, and please be our voice. And I've got another population that I need to continue to be their leader. I'm not just the leader to the black people, right? And so you got to make sure that you're still speaking to the folks who have fantastic husbands and wives that are law enforcement, that do a tremendous job every day. But you also got to speak to, hey, Breonna Taylor could be my sister. And there's a couple hundred folks on this call right now that are feeling that. And oh, by the way, this is not new. Like, we can continue to feel woke about it this year, but like we've been living with this for how many years? So, you know, fortunately, I was able to measure my words and recognize both. But to Jonathan and Tasha's comments, when the George Floyd piece came out, I was so fortunate to be on vacation that week. I was fortunate because the anger that was inside of me would not have been good if I was on the clock. And so it gave me a moment to kind of calm down, but I actually, you know, you talk about the tax that we have as we're having conversations with folks that don't look like us. One of the things I try to remind people is, it's great that you want to ask Lanice how she's doing because of the George Floyd thing, but again, this is not new. And if you don't have a relationship with me, I reminded people that it's like a bank relationship. That I used to work at a bank, and folks would come to the bank teller and they would write me a check, and I would look into their account and see, do they have funds? And if they had enough funds, then I would give them the withdrawal. But if they did not make enough deposits, then I would tell them, you have insufficient funds. And there's a lot of people over the last year that have been coming in the spirit of helping and learning and understanding, looking to make withdrawals, but they've made no deposits. And so that's where I've been reminding folks that before you get to the place where you want to help, you've got to now invest and make some deposits and do some personal research. And the other thing is, and I'll close with this, the other thing is the banks always show you on the front of the window their office hours. And that lets you know, even though you want to make a deposit, the bank might be closed today. So you got to come back tomorrow and give me the grace that today's not the day to share. I'm sorry. I got to be off camera today. I got to take a day off. And I know you want to help, but you got to come back when the bank's open.
Listen, honey, there's some snaps and taps up in this. I love the banking analogy, and I think what you described too is this absolute exhaustion that we have because, first of all, every day you black. So even if you don't leave your house, you still black, and you will be reminded of it. In whether it's just in your thinking, or if it's what is in your house or what isn't in your house, or that you see something on the news. We have, obviously we had the terrorism in Capitol Hill in January, right? It was like, oh, so okay, so y'all do know how to do this without her. Okay, all right. So we saw, while y'all just got done saying for a whole year that it's not racism, but we just saw that you did it totally different as far as the response to actual violence. We saw that exhausting, right? Even just in the last few days, you see Malcolm X's daughter releasing information about Malcolm X's assassination and potential FBI responsibility. We black, we kind of like knew that, but still, Aubrey's mother filing a lawsuit. So it's like every day, right? It's like so exhausting. What are your thoughts? How do you manage that? What's the experience like for you, Lenise?
Wow.
Take a moment to breathe. It's exhausting even hearing about it.
It is exhausting. And it's so funny because it's all this stuff going on. And all I could think about is my job did not know that I went out on FMLA because of that. You know what I'm saying? So now I am actually taking off another mask. Because when I went back to work, it's like, almost, I didn't say I had surgery, but if I could have came across some crutches, I probably would have, jumped on some crutches than to admit to somebody that I was broken. And so, so now I've done told the world and you guys.
You on camera, boo?
Yeah, I'm on camera. But part of the power that I've seen in this process is naming it. Right, is actually saying it out loud, because if I say it first, you can't say it about me, right? And so by the time you say it, I've already said it and accepted the truth. It's already out in the atmosphere, so find something else to hurt me with, so yeah, all I can say is I have a girlfriend that is Caucasian, and before she's one of my best friends, and before she and I got really, really close, we had to have conversation about race. You have to know how I feel and how I navigate this world before I can be vulnerable with you, right? And so, but I tell her all the time, like, man, I just want that white girl joy. That free, careless, like, put on some yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, 15
and
patterns,
show up to a
and
leadership
you
meeting.
Look good.
Yeah.
And then put your stuff in the ponytail. Like, I just want that ease, and I don't know what it feels like. And and nobody taught me how to take care of myself. They didn't. No one talked about wellness. No one talked about vacations and things
What's
like
a sabbatical?
that. And exactly.
Well, I'm in academia, so.
Right. We didn't. There was no tutorial. There was no training to prepare for some of this stuff. And then even for me, I'm the first college graduate. First one in is like corporate, so everybody think I've arrived.
Yes.
I have no problems. No problem. at
Everybody
all.
in your family looking at you?
Yeah, even I mean, and then I'm a certified diversity professional, and so now everybody want to talk to me about black and white issues and all this other kind of stuff, and I'm like, listen, I should start billing folks. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then I got to the point where I just say, like, I have no more to give. I'm done. But then that got dangerous because I started sitting in the house all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there was times where people were like, oh, it was nice outside. I'm like, for real? Like, I thought it was, you know, I was in the house like it was winter. And I had to shake myself out of that. But then who do you call when everybody calls you?
Yeah, yeah, the strong ones. Yep. So as we start wrapping up, I want to just finally get you all's thoughts on success, the word success. You know, in my work, in the research that I've encountered, interestingly, what I see is that folks who have more money and titles and influence and recognition, oftentimes the success is limited to the financial domain and the career domain. But the relationships, maybe not so much. You've been with your wife 15 years, but it's for the last 8 you've slept in different bedrooms, or you know, with the children, you know, not really a strong relationship. Of course, because you have the money, they are funded, right? And everything they want, they have, but that relationship part, not so much. Spiritual, if there is any, right? So when I look at the definition of success, this is one of the really passionate pieces of my life in working with blue chips and executives is let's redefine it, because really what you all have disclosed today, and at least in my view, doesn't fit the definition of success. And the success as it's defined today almost sentences you, right, to being limited to an external arrival, but never having gotten it together on the inside. And so you see, I mean, you see, I'm a sports head, so like 30 for 30s, right? You see the stories of the rise and then the fall, and then, you know, you look at someone who had a great career, best ever at it, but you can also see that, wow, you're still not happy and you're undisputed #1 in everything. I won't say names. But what are your all thoughts on the definition of success? Is it limiting? Is there room for redefining it? How do you define it for yourself, Tasha?
Yeah, I think the younger generation is teaching us, you know, who would have thought that, you know, an iPhone, an empty room would make you a millionaire, right? And they're really defining, I mean, tiny house living came from the, you know, Gen Zers and Gen Y generation. They're defining, you know, I want to backpack around the world. And I think success is freedom. I think what we're doing today is a sign of success. The people I admire, whether they're famous or, you know, infamous, are people who dance to their own tune. You know, they just walk in a room, and I'm sure they have their own insecurities, but they just walk in a room and just, you know, everybody want to be around them because it's like, you just got this thing about you where it's just like, you just don't care. You know, you walk in, and I'm working on that, where it's just like, you know, even I struggle to say if, you know, that, you know, I was depressed, you know what I mean? But it's like, I also could think about the lives that I could be saving too. We often think about kind of the negative, you know, connotation behind what we're going to say and what could come as of that. And I think who we admire are the people who can speak up and speak out. We follow them. And so, you know, for me, success has been, you know, my own trend. I'm trending.
I like it. That lipstick is success too. But anyway, yes, go ahead. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on the concept
one of the words you said was freedom, and maybe I'll just give a couple words and explain why. One would be joy, and another would be an us. And the joy part is really, you know, there are things that we know give us joy, right? And you know, part of joy as opposed to happiness, because you know, happiness is often dependent on happenings, whereas like joy, we get to take part in this. I get to decide what gives me joy, and when you have that freedom to find, you know, what gives you joy, you know, that's a level of success. The other thing too is an us conversation. I think so many things right now, we limit success to a singular person, a singular individual, or if I can get what they have, that person, I have success. And it's like, man, when we can have more conversations about we and us doing well, I mean, I think that's another great marker for success.
I love that. And I don't know if you know or felt it, but as you described it, your whole body lit up.
Yes.
So I believe you're walking in it right now, and I love it.
Wow, Jonathan.
Trying at least, so yeah.
Well, and that's all you can do, right? Every day?
Yeah.
Lanice, what do you think?
I don't know. My first initial thought is to be determined. You know, I really don't know what it is. But to piggyback off of what Tasha said, I do want to walk in the room and be like, I don't give a bleep what you think. You know, like I want to be able to have that freedom and that joy and that privilege and that, you know what I'm saying, not have the wires tied to me. I don't want to have to wear a mask, and I want to be okay with saying that I'm not okay today and not feel any type of shame. You know, I want that. I just don't know what it is. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I know it requires me to continue to stay still like I've been doing so that I can continue to figure it out. Yvette McGee is, I have a crush on her, and she's one, she's one of my mentors. And I had a conversation with her, and she told me, I said, I'm about to go get my JD. I want to go to law school and all that. She was like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to prove? Do you want a family? I'm like, yeah.
Because you can't do both.
Exactly. I mean, she didn't say I couldn't do both, but what she told me is, she said, you've had your head down so long trying to build your career. When are you going to be intentional about your family? Yes. When are you going to be intentional about building that? Where do you think you're going to date? Where do you think you're going to build? You know, you have to put the work in order to do that. And so I've been just doing a lot of reflecting. So ask me in about a year.
Well, I think you're on to something, and of course, because I am a clinician and a coach, I got to drop some jewels. I would just say to you that, you know, you are the keeper of the keys, and really in all my work, that's all I'm doing with folks is helping them figure that out. That the answer lies in you, and I think that's part of the challenge of what success has meant and still means in most cases. It's this external thing. And it's something you have to wait for others to at least partially allow you to have, or, you know, some way in which you earn your way to it. But you know, in my work, all that I do, I have all of the credentials. I know that feeling of getting 50 million degrees, because, like, I'm gonna be honest, I have too many credentials to where I don't even put them all on my signature, because I know at this point it kind of looks stupid. Because what are you doing? I probably could be diagnosed just based on that behavior. You know, but I was that person, you know, from history of trauma, sexual violence as a child, you know, was like, I didn't consciously think of it, but subconsciously I told myself that I needed to qualify. And so, interestingly, my success has really been my coping mechanism up until more recent years, when I took that step back and began to reflect. Even as a clinician, it took me a long time to figure that out. So I realized I was being successful in how much money I made, in what car I drove, and which stilettos I wore, because it was always stilettos and it always matched, that was me really trying to validate, right? And so after doing that work for long enough, you know, you eventually learn to give yourself the gift, give yourself the permission. And the wild thing is that there's actually nothing in your way other than you. Now, admittedly, it's hard, right, to get out of your own way, but really that's what it comes down to. So I'm cheering for you. I look forward to seeing you continue to blossom, because I know that you're here. Sharing like this is growth in and of itself. So love and light to you.
Appreciate it.
And lastly, Jay, what do you think about this definition of success and what it means for you?
Yeah, as I was listening to each one talk, one thing that jumped out was success isn't a destination, it's a journey. Sometimes success is just waking up and enjoying the sun and melting some of this snow from yesterday.
Yes,
Right?
let's go.
And I had a mentor tell me several years ago something that I've really gravitated to. He said, Jay, at some point you'll move from seeking success to significance.
Wow.
And your legacy is less about the money you make, the titles you have, the accomplishments that you've been able to achieve, and more about the legacy you leave, the people that you've been impacting, the tables and the chairs that you've been able to establish. So I think each one here around this circle, that's what we've been pursuing and that's what we've been doing. So that would be my charge for folks. Don't worry about success. Shift your focus to significance, because that's what
I like it. We snapped some taps in here. Well, thank you all so much for this conversation. Thank you for your boldness and your courage. Again, I want to do this like every day, because I can't wait to hear the feedback. I know people are going to be, like you said, for all the potential challenges we may face by keeping it real, we also know those emails we get and those texts we get to say, man, I needed to hear that. So I'm thankful for you all to be willing to do this. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. It's awesome. But the journalist in me has a couple quick questions. Have you found it freeing? Did you have a way, you talked about that anxiety about going back to work, but is talking about your mental health experience, is that therapeutic for you? What's that like?
What, speaking about it?
Right.
It is therapeutic. And honestly, what became comforting is that other people validated that they were feeling the same way, right? So I found out that I was helping people. So, you know, one of the initial calls I had was someone say, I was concerned about you. And I told her, I was like, you know what, forget it. This is what was going on. And she said, I'm so glad you told me that, because I'm dealing with this and I'm dealing with that. And I realized that, you know, like we talked about before, I'm not the only one. And so actually having a conversation, but the thing is, it's the vulnerability, right? Because sometimes you had a conversation with someone who scars you, you know, they add another scar to what you already experienced.
And they haven't made a deposit and they're trying to withdraw
Exactly.
that.
Go ahead, bring that bank
Like
back.
that. I'm right. All right.
Yes, yes.
I'm gonna repeat that and act like I came up with it. I'm like, I used to work in the bank. And the last thing is, you all talked about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but right here in Columbus, we had Casey Goodson Jr., we had Andre Hill. What was that like for you all going back to work, trying to hold your head up to talk about it? I know in the newsroom it was challenging in many ways, but we all talked about it and we pushed to make sure that we covered it and we had open conversations about it. But what was that like for you all going back into the workplace with this burden and this weight?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, go for
Keeping it real.
Yeah, go for it.
So our largest office is in Columbus, right? But we have 11 offices around the country, and similar to some of the things that others have mentioned, just working in other communities. But not the most ideal barometer, but for me, listen to NPR in the morning. It's national news, right? It's just exhausting, frustrating, like to the point that I don't even want to deal with it. I don't. The fact that we're sitting here, it's a national news, and they're talking about what's happening in Columbus.
In your backyard.
And it's like, yeah, it's like, I mean, it's just like, this can't be real, right? It's like, I'd rather just not pretend that it didn't happen, but I guess for me, it was just like, I'm not ready to deal with this, because it's like, I'm still not done dealing with the other stuff. And it's like, and it, not only is it not ready to deal with this here, but it's like it's here, right? And it's arguably worse, because it was multiple. So and anyhow, well, I'm gonna stop, because I'll just say, even within things that have happened in the last week, to try to make change and make difference, it's like still can't here.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I didn't say anything, but.
That's one of the things that stood out to me with that particular piece, was that it is here and we're here, And then I think back to all of the conversations I had with white folks who were allegedly trying to make deposits, and how quiet, like how it wasn't a conversation. In my world, I don't know about you all, but nobody was talking about two in the same city within 30 days, 45 days of each other during the holidays, and I didn't hear anything from white folks in my world. But then that was followed by a white person contacting me about some Black History Month, in January. And I unapologetically said, I don't have any feedback for you for Black History Month, honey, because if you were living this, we would have been having conversations about multiple things before now, including stuff that has nothing to do with me being Black. But I just was like, I felt like it really showed the light on the talk versus the walk with the white people that I have encountered. And I am saying that generally and broadly because I'm saying that all of them, I didn't hear anything from them. And I would think with that case of two Black men being here in Columbus that, but they were off being safe, after they made their statements and put out their really great corporate stances about racism, and then that was it. So that was my experience, and yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I would say, I actually am fortunate. I feel fortunate to work for an employer that has really encouraged us to have a conversation at work, and I've taken full advantage of that. And so to the point that I feel like you got to calm down a little bit. You might sound a little militant, but some of this stuff I still have not processed. I'm still processing it because I still walked in with my own trauma, right? And I'm able to be transparent about mourning the death of a Black man, about mourning someone that I can look in his face and he looks like my nephew and my uncle. And when I see myself in these individuals, then you're gonna see how I feel. I can't hide it anymore. I can't protect you from it. I was trained to protect you from it, and the one thing it's taught me is that I have to tell you how I feel, and I can't protect you from the truth anymore. I can't. I just can't. So if I'm mad, you're gonna know that I'm mad. If I'm hurt, you're gonna know that I'm hurt. And I can't apologize, and I have to keep reminding myself that you can't apologize for how you feel.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I shared just the other day, because our organization too, we're a national organization and across 29 cities, and we're opening up this safe space. I don't believe in safe spaces, right? Because it's still a risk you take. But we save your thoughts and prayers, right? I grew up in an apostolic church. I'm from Brittenell, so thoughts and prayers. I've been there, done that. But this wasn't this. It's always the time, but that's not what you say, right? It was. We need action. You know what I mean? And what's next? I mean, we saw all these bold statements of what we're going to do, and yet I even look in our own community and how we celebrate the diversity, and all these companies put out these statements, and then I see these two big announcements of new leadership, and they don't look like us helping these black and brown folks, right? And it's like, where was the commitment to diversity, right? That we can hold these conversations. And so when things like that happen, where we had Casey Goodson and it's like it's hard to not let yourself be numb, because you don't see the action aligning with the bold statements.
But then just to add on that, but then you see Casey Goodson, and then as you are just trying to make sense of it, there's Andre Hill right behind.
Then there's Andre Hill, who lived in a neighborhood. I didn't know him personally, but my uncles did. He grew up in Brittenell. I'm from Brittenell, right? And so that was like family, to my uncles and to others. And so, it just hit close to home. And every time, George Floyd, all of them, you always look at your husband or your brother, that could be you. But truly, when it happens in your backyard, you're like, that is my brother. You know what I mean? That is my brother. And you do fear. And I told someone earlier this week, until you have to wake up every day and worry about how you'll race or your skin tone is going to impact your day, don't talk to me about how I should feel. We wake up wondering how what we say, do, wear, look, blink, smile, breathe, walk, shop is going to impact if we come home at night.
It's powerful.
Can I add one thing to that? Those two images are played out consistently, but the angering thing is there's a third video that doesn't get talked about as much, and I can't remember his name, but it was a white gentleman in Delaware County in our backyard who was driving and got pulled over by policemen, being irate and having not just the right, but feeling like I'm empowered to be belligerent and threaten to shoot these police officers, and they are literally begging and pleading with this man for 10 minutes to please put the gun away. And so we ask folks, how do you feel about law enforcement? How do you feel? Help me make sense of that. Help me make sense of, I'm just trying to get home. And I might be home. And when you can make decisions and split-second decisions, that's tough for me to kind of tell my nephews and myself. So
This has been good. It'll be I think it's gonna be great, and it's not just us coming together to exploit our experience. We want to let it breathe. So I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you
We
all.
appreciate
no,
that.
thank you all. You all were awesome.